a dream that refused to die. It stood unfinished for centuries, a towering skeleton of stone, a question mark etched against the sky. And yet, no one tore it down. Because deep down, they believed, it still had something to say. In the heart of Cologne, Germany, rising like a dark flame from the banks of the Rhine, stands one of the most astonishing structures ever created by human hands, the Cologne Cathedral. To the casual tourist, it may seem like just another Gothic marvel, spires, stained glass, flying buttresses. But look closer. Its story is not just architectural. It's existential. It took 632 years to complete. That's longer than most countries have existed. Longer than the time between the fall of Rome and the invention of the printing press. Longer than the entire lifespan of the Aztec and Inca empires, combined. Why would anyone start a building they would never live to see finished? Because they believed in something bigger than themselves. This is not just the story of a cathedral. It's the story of an idea. An idea carried by stonemasons, kings, bishops, revolutionaries, and ordinary citizens, across plagues, wars, and revolutions. And if you follow the trail of stone, it leads to a mystery far more powerful than any one religion. How does something survive when the world that created it is long gone? Let's go back, to the very beginning. Back before it was a monument. Before it was a shell. Before it was even a dream. To the moment a single relic arrived in Cologne, and everything changed. The relic that changed everything. In the year 1164, a war-weary archbishop returned from Italy, with something so sacred, it could make a city holy. Reinald of Dassel was not a typical churchman. He was a politician, a diplomat, a schemer. As Chancellor of the Holy Roman Empire, he was in the thick of 12th century power struggles between emperors and popes, kings and crusaders. But in 1164, he did something unexpected. He acquired, some say stole, the relics of the 3 wise men from Milan. Yes, those 3 wise men. The Magi who followed the star, bringing gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the newborn Jesus. To medieval Christians, these weren't just bones. They were a cosmic endorsement. The Magi were proof that even the wisest men of the East bowed to Christ. To possess their remains was to possess something beyond authority. It was to possess divine legitimacy. Reinald brought the relics back to Cologne with triumph, and the city exploded in celebration. But then came the problem. Where do you house something so holy? The small Romanesque church of St. Peter couldn't contain the flood of pilgrims. And more importantly, it couldn't match the glory of the relic. Reinald, and the cathedral chapter, decided they needed to build something worthy. Not just big, not just beautiful, but eternal. This wasn't about architecture. This was about claiming destiny. The vision was audacious. Inspired by the Gothic cathedrals rising in France, Chartres, Amiens, Reims, Cologne would outdo them all. It would be the tallest, the widest, the most gloriously intricate building in Christendom. Every arch would rise like prayer. Every column would speak of God. Every stone would carry the soul of the city. And so, on August 15, 1248, under the patronage of Archbishop Conrad von Hochstaden, the first stone was laid. The choir, the Sacred Heart of the cathedral, would be built first, surrounding the shrine of the 3 kings. Construction began. Thousands of hands went to work. Stonemasons, glassworkers, roofers, sculptors. It was a sacred labor, a lifelong task that none of them expected to see finished. And yet they built. Every day, every year, every generation. Because the cathedral wasn't just for them. It was for the future. But the future had other plans. A city of ghosts and a cathedral frozen in time. For over 300 years, Cologne lived in the shadow of a dream, unfinished, unfulfilled, yet too sacred to abandon. A monument not to triumph, but to patience. The great cathedral had begun with fire in the heart, but it soon collided with the harsh ice of reality. By the mid-16th century, work on Cologne Cathedral ground to a silent halt. The reasons were many, layered like the bricks themselves. Money ran dry. Massive cathedrals were funded by donations, indulgences, and the pockets of nobility. But Cologne's coffers were empty. Faith was shifting. The Protestant Reformation, launched just 200 miles away in Wittenberg by Martin Luther in 1517, had splintered Europe's religious unity. Political chaos erupted across the Holy Roman Empire. There were revolts, invasions, and wars that left little room for lofty projects. And just like that, the cranes stopped turning. The sound of chisels faded. The dream stood still. The skeleton of a monument. For the people of Cologne, the cathedral was no longer a work in progress. It became a landmark of lost potential. The towers, barely begun. Their stumps rose like broken teeth. A single wooden crane, once the marvel of 13th century engineering, stood on the south tower for centuries, frozen in time. Rain and moss crept across the stones. The unfinished facade loomed like a wound that never healed. And yet, they didn't demolish it. Why not tear it down and build something smaller, something useful? Because even unfinished, the cathedral was holy. The relics of the Magi still rested in the gold-gilded shrine. Mass was still celebrated in the completed choir. The shell still housed sacred memory. And so, the people of Cologne lived with their half-cathedral. A structure that belonged neither to the past nor the future. A ghost of glory. The rise of Romanticism, and the birth of a symbol. The 18th century came. The Enlightenment swept across Europe. And yet, something strange began to happen. Writers, artists, and thinkers began to reevaluate the cathedral. Not as a failure, but as a monument to longing. The German Romantics, in particular, saw in the cathedral a mirror of their own yearning. For beauty, for identity, for something lost. It became a symbol of the unfinished soul of the German people. The poet Heinrich Heine wrote of it as a giant frozen in stone. Visitors sketched its jagged silhouette against twilight skies. Tourists climbed the half-built towers and stared across the Rhine, dreaming of what could have been. And slowly, that dream returned. But this time, it wasn't only about religion. It was about nationhood. What if finishing the cathedral wasn't just a spiritual act, but a political one? How a broken empire resurrected a sacred dream. It wasn't faith that brought Cologne Cathedral back to life. It was fire. Not from heaven, but from the fever of nationalism and the dream of a new Germany. The year was 1814. Napoleon Bonaparte, who had once stormed across Europe like a force of nature, was finally defeated. The Holy Roman Empire was dead. The political map of Europe lay shattered. In the wake of that collapse, a new question haunted the German lands. What does it mean to be German? There was no united Germany yet, only a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and principalities. But one symbol stood quietly at the heart of the old empire, Cologne Cathedral. Still unfinished, still waiting. And for a new generation of German thinkers, writers, and leaders, this cathedral became something more than just a religious site. It became a national project. The resurrection of the Gothic giant. In the early 19th century, a remarkable discovery reignited hope. The original medieval architectural plans, drawn by hand centuries earlier, had been preserved. These weren't sketches. They were detailed blueprints, massive parchment sheets rolled up and forgotten in the archives. It was as if the past had left a message for the future. Pick up where we left off. King Friedrich Wilhelm IV of Prussia, inspired by both piety and politics, made the call. The cathedral would be finished. On September 4, 1842, construction resumed, nearly 300 years after it had stopped. Crowds gathered. Flags waved. The king himself laid the cornerstone of the new era. And once again, Cologne rang with the sound of hammers and chisels. But this time, the scaffolding rose alongside something else. German nationalism. Germany a church for a nation. To many Germans, the rising cathedral was more than a religious monument. It was a visual metaphor for unity. Each stone added was a symbol of shared identity, a common heritage stretching from Bavaria to Prussia. Cologne Cathedral began appearing in paintings, poems, and patriotic speeches. It was seen as proof that Germany, like the cathedral, could rise from its fragmented past and become whole again. This wasn't just architecture. It was political theater, set in stone. A blend of ages. There was a strange beauty in the fusion of timelines. Medieval plans guided modern engineers. Gothic ideals were realized with industrial tools. Ancient designs met 19th-century ambition. Steam engines powered cranes. Precision-cut stones came by rail. And all the while, craftsmen honored the old traditions, carving by hand, echoing the footsteps of masons long dead. By the 1860s, the towers began rising like never before. One, then the other, higher and higher, until 1880, the crown is set. On October 15, 1880, after 632 years, the last stone was set. Bells rang. Streets filled. Flags flew. The tallest building in the world, at 157 meters, was finally complete. Generations had come and gone. Empires had risen and fallen. But Cologne Cathedral endured. And yet, even as people celebrated, few realized. The hardest test was still to come. Because within 60 years, the world would burn again, and the towers would be caught in the crossfire of history's most devastating war. The night the sky fell, and the cathedral refused to die. The fires came. The bombs fell. The city vanished beneath rubble and ash. But somehow, the cathedral stood. As if it had been made for more than just worship, as if it was meant to outlast war itself. The 20th century brought with it the most violent conflict in human history, World War II, and the skies above Europe turned black with bombers. Cologne, a city rich in history and strategic significance, became a major target. In 1942 alone, Cologne was bombed 262 times. The city was shattered. Entire blocks were leveled. Families were buried beneath bricks and flame. Ancient buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled in seconds. But through it all, Cologne Cathedral remained standing. Yes, it was hit. Yes, it was damaged. But it never fell. And to this day, people ask the same haunting question. How did it survive when nothing else did? The miracle of the twin spires. There are several theories, none of them fully satisfying. Some say Allied bombers deliberately avoided the cathedral, that they used its twin spires as a navigational marker, a landmark visible even from 20,000 feet. Others claim that pilots were simply awed by the cathedral's majesty, that even in war, there were certain things too sacred to destroy. But others believe something deeper, that Cologne Cathedral was protected, by fate, by faith, or by something beyond our understanding. It became a symbol of survival, rising from the smoke like a black angel. Inside, glass shattered, roof beams cracked, but the walls held. Where once it had taken centuries to build, now it was taking seconds to defend its soul. And yet, the city around it was nearly erased. Candle a refuge in the ashes. In the chaos of bombings, the cathedral became a refuge. Civilians huddled beneath its arches as the ground shook outside. Priests conducted mass by candlelight, surrounded by rubble. Bells still tolled, even when no one knew who lived to hear them. The Shrine of the Magi, the same relic that had inspired the cathedral centuries before, remained untouched. Coincidence? Or something more? One American pilot who flew bombing runs over Germany later said, "I don't know why we didn't destroy it. Maybe we couldn't. Maybe some part of us didn't want to." Post-war Cologne, a city reborn in ruin. When the war finally ended in 1945, Cologne was barely recognizable. The medieval heart of the city was gone. And yet, there it was, the cathedral, damaged but upright. It became a rallying point for a broken people. A place to mourn. A place to pray. A place to begin again. But repairing it would take decades. Carefully, stone by stone, artisans returned. Glassmakers recreated windows shattered by fire. Historians sifted through debris to restore lost carvings. Engineers reinforced its aging bones. And through it all, the question lingered. Was the cathedral now a monument to God, or to human endurance? 632 years later, the cathedral that would not quit. Most buildings are finished and forgotten. But Cologne Cathedral is different. Even when it was complete, it kept evolving. By 1948, Cologne Cathedral stood once again, battered but unbroken. And yet, even after the final spire had risen in 1880, and the bombs had fallen in the 1940s, the cathedral was still not done. Because Cologne Cathedral never really stopped being built. Hammer and wrench the ongoing restoration. Here's a staggering fact. Even today, right now, Cologne Cathedral is under constant construction. A team of over 80 full-time artisans, architects, and stoneworkers are employed year-round. They climb the spires. They replace cracked statues. They clean off centuries of grime, acid rain, and urban pollution. Because Gothic stone, especially in the polluted air of modern cities, deteriorates quickly. Statues lose their noses. Gargoyles crumble. Mortar weakens. But this is no temporary renovation. It is perpetual preservation. A relay race of generations, with every team passing the torch to the next. "We don't finish the cathedral," one stonemason said. "We keep it alive." Scroll secrets in the stone. And as they restore, they uncover stories. Marks left by medieval masons, still visible under ancient arches. Odd carvings hidden in corners, from mythical beasts to faces believed to be portraits of real people. Even bones and artifacts entombed in the walls, left like whispers from a vanished world. In 2007, scientists discovered that the stained glass windows contain traces of medieval air pollution, essentially trapping the atmospheric history of the city in colored light. Every inch of the cathedral is a library, etched in limestone. Not just of faith, but of time. DNA, a living symbol. But perhaps the greatest miracle is how Cologne Cathedral continues to evolve in meaning. In the 13th century, it was a vessel of relics. In the 19th, a symbol of German unity. In the 20th, a survivor of apocalypse. And today, it stands as a universal icon. It welcomes tourists, pilgrims, skeptics, artists, believers, and wanderers alike. Some light candles. Some take selfies. Some just stand in silence. All of them, in their own way, are answering the call of a structure that refuses to be forgotten. You don't visit Cologne Cathedral to understand the past. You go to feel the weight of time itself, the cathedral and the future of faith. In an age of speed, cynicism, and short attention spans, one slow, sacred building still stops people in their tracks. Cologne Cathedral isn't just a relic. It's a paradox. It was built by faith, finished by nationalism, preserved by science. And today, it stands at the intersection of all those things, in a world that's questioning everything. Because in a secular, digitized society where skyscrapers rise in months and trends vanish in hours, what do we do with something that took 632 years to finish? A spiritual monument in a secular age. Europe today is not the medieval world. Church attendance has declined. Belief systems have splintered. Faith, for many, has become personal rather than institutional. And yet, Cologne Cathedral still draws over 6 million visitors a year. Why? Because even if you don't believe in God, you can still believe in devotion. Even if you don't follow religion, you can still feel awe in the face of time, ambition, and beauty. Cologne Cathedral has become something larger than its origin. It is a mirror, reflecting whatever you bring to it. For the believer, it's a house of God. For the historian, a record of centuries. For the architect, a masterclass in engineering. For the traveler, a wonder of the world. What the printing press did for knowledge, Cologne Cathedral did for faith. It made the invisible visible. The rise of digital pilgrims. And now, in the 21st century, people don't even need to walk its halls to experience it. High-resolution virtual tours. Drone footage soaring between its towers. 3D laser scans revealing every crack and column. Even TikTok clips of its glowing stained glass have gone viral. In a way, the cathedral is more accessed today than ever before. A place built for pilgrims has now found digital ones, scattered across the globe. Interfaith, intergenerational, immortal. In recent years, the cathedral has opened its doors even wider, hosting interfaith concerts between Christian and Muslim artists, providing shelter to Ukrainian refugees, partnering with environmental groups to promote sustainability. It has become more than a church. It is a platform for compassion, culture, and continuity. And all of it, inside walls laid centuries ago by people who couldn't imagine electricity, let alone the internet. The cathedral was never just for Christians. It was always meant for the future. What Cologne Cathedral really teaches us, 632 years later. In a world obsessed with speed, Cologne Cathedral whispers something ancient and true, that some things are worth waiting for, even if they take 632 years. This isn't just a story about a church. It's not even just about faith. It's about something much bigger, something humanity is on the verge of forgetting. The art of patience, the value of unfinished work, the power of sacred persistence. Because Cologne Cathedral wasn't built by one person, not even one generation. It was a chain of hope, stretched across 800 years. From the mason who laid the first stone in 1248, to the workers restoring gargoyles in 2024. Each of them played only a tiny part in a story none of them would live to see completed. And they did it anyway. What are we building that's bigger than us? In our modern age, we chase quick wins. We launch, scale, and pivot. We scroll, click, and refresh. We want results now. But Cologne Cathedral is a reminder that some dreams outlive us. And that's okay. Because maybe the point isn't to finish. Maybe the point is to contribute. The people who built this never saw the end result. And yet, they carved every angel with love. Because it wasn't about them. It was about the sacred. Legacy over ego. Cologne Cathedral forces us to ask, what are we working on that we'll never finish? What stones are we laying that someone else will stand on? What are we leaving behind that still matters in 600 years? The builders of Cologne didn't think their names would be remembered. And for the most part, they aren't. But their work is. Their fingerprints are still on every corner. And that, more than any monument, is their immortality. A final moment of reflection. Stand in the center of the cathedral today, beneath the soaring rib vaults. Listen. You'll hear silence, and also the hum of time. You'll feel small and strangely significant. Because in that moment, you are part of something unbroken. Something ancient. Something sacred. The people who started this believed in something bigger than themselves. And now, 632 years later, so do we. The human cathedral. Cologne Cathedral is a building. But it's also a message. One chiseled in stone, carried across centuries, and still echoing now. Dream big. Start slow. Accept the long arc. And build what's worth building, even if you'll never see it finished. That is the legacy. That is the lesson. That is the cathedral. If this story moved you, this channel is where forgotten histories come alive. Hit subscribe and let's keep building something timeless. What other cathedrals of patience and perseverance deserve to be remembered? Comment below.